Okay, welcome everybody. We're gonna start here in a few minutes. Let everybody enter into the room as we're getting ready here. Okay, we're gonna get started and welcome everybody. We're here to talk about, from a webinar perspective, getting your AI ready with a data foundation, building a data foundation for the future. And we're going to really talk about getting the readiness framework in place. So talking about how you're going to plan, experiment, stabilize, expand, and transform in your journey around getting ready for AI. So I'm Kurt Witt with Hudson Logic, managing partner. I've been between industry and consulting for the last 25 years, focused around data platforms, analytics, and now AI. So welcome, Darren.
This is Darren Galloway, Director of Enterprise Sales at Techstone Technology Partners, based here in Houston, Texas.
And
Zach Breimeyer, Senior Solution Engineer here at Incorta. Pleasure to meet you all.
Welcome. So, Darren, why don't you introduce Techstone?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for joining everyone. Again, this is Darren Galloway with Techstone. We're an SI and partnered with best in breed solutions like Incorta. We have 21 years of proven success in data integration and modern analytics implementations. With an expertise across a wide range of technologies, including Incorta, Boomi, Azure, GCP, and AWS, and others ecosystems. Been in business since 2004, and again, working closely with solutions like Incorta, helping implement direct data platforms for real-time insights. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so let's get to it. So let's talk about Gartner right now. I'm sure everybody's read about what's happening with Gartner they're really talking about what's going to happen over the next future here. For next year, they're looking at 50% of organizations are really needing to wrangle their fragmented data management systems. I mean, especially if you're trying to get around enabling data fabric and Gen AI solutions, you really need to reduce that complexity and reduce the integration cost that associated with that. So we're here to talk to you about that, how we can help you with that discussion. So everybody knows the race for AI is on. I mean, the pressures within your organization is really being felt, right? Your leadership is pushing down on it. There's your investors, they're all expecting that you're driving towards use cases. But let's be honest, you really can't fake that AI success. And the reality is you need to get your house in order before you really can start to accomplish those expectations, to reach those expectations that your leadership is looking for. So we're going to ask a few poll questions through here. Matter of fact, keep any questions that you have through the session to the end, and we'll handle those. But we have some poll questions, and we're going to take on the first one. So, what % of your executive team believes your data is AI ready today? All right, we got some answers. Looks like they're pretty well spread, which is the majority are not feeling that they're actually AI ready today. Okay. Awesome. All right, so we're going to continue on. So let's talk about what's blocking that data readiness. So from a data silo and inconsistency perspective, right? Data is all across your organization. It's fragmented through acquisitions, through systems deployments. You create this capability of across your organization of fragmented data. So how do you bring that together, right? It's the whole challenge of bringing limited visibility, getting generated unified data, getting accurate insights together, which then actually generates unprepared and untrusted data. So with AI, the importance of having good quality data, so you ensure that you have context, so you know where the data is coming from. It's really important to getting sure that your skepticism is in there. You can reduce the skepticism around what's going on. But really generating the lack of unified data models. So from a data perspective, having all these distributed systems, having fragmentation, there's no way to actually establish true standards for your data. And it creates challenges around the interoperability across your business units. Everybody's using their own definition across what they mean, something means from a data perspective within their group. So we're going to ask another question. What is your biggest challenge of becoming data ready? We'll give a chance for that. It looks like, again, lack of integration across systems really is challenging, poor data quality and technology complexity, right? And those are all things that definitely resonate. So in that, the way we look at it, there's really three legs of the stool around this, how to getting AI ready. You have the technology, right? Ensuring you have the data platforms in place, making sure you have the orchestration and tools ready to wrap around those data platforms, having the underpinnings for the infrastructure to support real-time and governed and explainable AI pipelines, right? Those are really key things to have within your technology stack. And then the data itself, making sure you have clear definitions, making sure you have clear ownership, right? IT never owns the platform, never owns the data. IT is there to support that. So making sure that your business entities are all taking ownership and understand how they steward that data consistently. And then making sure as trust is a big piece of this, making sure you have ensure consistency and compliance on what's going to be actually become your AI outputs, right? And your inputs for from a data perspective. And then ultimately, we talked about getting your business models. How do you standardize those data structures, ensuring that they transcend your applications and your departments, so that you have consistency, so that you have reuse, that they're all using the same basis for the information. Your HR group, your finance group, your operations, they're all talking from the same language. They're all talking from the same underpinning of data, which builds that trust. So where is most of your organization's critical data today? So yeah, it looks like departmental databases and CRMs and line of business systems. Very typical, and it's a challenge, right, to get the data out of those systems. And that's where bringing them to a system platform and having ease of use is really key. And that's how we look at it from the pillars of AI data readiness, right? It's getting good data quality. And I think where there used to be the days of reporting, if the analytics was bad, you could still have someone that would validate the report and could determine where the data was from. But now with AI, right? If you have the foundation with garbage comes in, it's really going to fail from an AI perspective. Having that true data governance, so making sure you have controls that are put in place, transparency, and really making sure you have traceability to support that across the entire life cycle. So that doesn't mean just data getting loaded into the platform, but how do you ensure all the way end to end that you have visibility and controls around the platform? And then these business models, right? These really become really key because once you have that reusable business model, which are business driven, you can avoid those silos and create that you reuse across the organization, which then again allows for data governance, allows for good data quality. And then really the technology, right? Making sure you have the tools that you can operationalize quickly to support your AI vision. How do you go quickly, right? That's the whole concept. How do you fail fast, but to be able to, and then be able to refactor where you need to in an appropriate path. So which of these slowdowns down AI adoption the most in your org today? Cost is becoming the data foundation, very clear why we're talking. Business cases, definitely that's another one. That's definitely a struggle, not having the proper business cases, business trying to understand what they're looking at. Lack of trust in AI outputs that's generated by the lack of governance, right? And then really the cost. What is this really going to cost everybody, right? From a delivery perspective. So if getting into that process, getting a good foundation really helps drive, again, improving your decision making. I mean, we all want to create operational efficiency and cost savings for our business. We want to make sure that we're able to eliminate a lot of their duplicate efforts, streamline those pipelines for them, but also ultimately create that cross-functional collaboration, right? So that business groups are working together, shared data, shared definitions, unified platforms. And that's all done through basically accelerating that AI, using technologies and methodologies that help you accelerate that AI and analytics outcomes, creating high quality business ready data and creating AI effectiveness around trusted outcomes, accelerating development, right? How do you do this faster, quickly, fast, smart, right? Things that we need to really do, especially with the lean teams and lean organizations that we're all running from a business perspective. And so how would you rate your organization's current data maturity? We've seen this, 1 to 2 is really good. Um, it's a challenge around that. We're seeing that a lot of them, some are trying to figure out where they are 6 to 12 months. That's what we see a lot right now. That's really where people are kind of trying to still figure it out right now. A lot of people are mistaking Gen AI for, again, where things are going with AI from a data perspective, the agentic layer, what's going on from there. A lot of mistaken thinking what the value that you're getting out of Copilot, which is great. It's helping ask questions for your organization, but is it really driving the value what your organizations really need, which is again untethering your data and getting some controls around that. But yeah, it looks like most people are between the 6 and 12 months and 1 to 2 years. Makes perfect sense. So we're going to talk about a reference architecture and how do you do that AI enablement, right? The core and the path to it is really how do you get that good foundation in there, making sure you have a way of bringing your raw data into the platform. Again, traceability is a very important piece of this. Creating the transformation layer so that you can truly show where your data is being cleansed, how it's being mapped, how it's changing as you progress it into what's going to be your curated certified data. Creating that foundation, creating a way of bringing that data together into one single platform, but having that traceability across it is such a key piece to it. Because then once you enable it for that agentic orchestration, right, be able to actually have it understand through tagging and capabilities where your data is coming from, what's coming on from a process standpoint, where it helps you enable that from a architecture perspective. So having these layers kind of consistently put together, working together, right, and building that trust around it enables you to have that support for the agentic layer, and then the agents, right? The agents are going to come to that. That's where they're going to have that those processes built against it. The users are going to be compelled to use those and pull trusted data from it. So I'm going to turn this over to Zach, and Zach's going to start to walk you through from an Incorta perspective what this looks like.
Perfect. So I'm going to spend a few minutes covering just a couple of slides, and then we'll spend a bulk of our time out in the platform, out in Incorta. Many of us like to kind of see things visually, and I can illustrate how we do what we say we do. Now, as Kurt mentioned, ultimately, there's certain scenarios, and the surveys, kind of discover a little bit of this as well, where many organizations simply aren't prepared for kind of this next generation of agents that we're all kind of experiencing, a lot of excitement out in industry around. And many of the challenges really just do correlate around, it's very challenging to harmonize multiple sources. I have potentially many ERPs through merger and acquisition type activity, maybe I have, a single ERP and I have a CRM and I have various other source systems. And these could be some very challenging, scenarios for organizations. And I think that's why, several of you, cited, trust in the data and some other, current challenges that your organization is facing. These aren't simple solutions from a traditional perspective. However, with Incorta, we can kind of ease that burden and very rapidly get a data foundation in place, whether that's supporting analytic frameworks or the AI ML agentic frameworks that your organizations may be kind of looking at. So from an Incorta perspective, we have three core pillars, and the first one really is multi-source in days, and we absolutely can deliver on that. If you have, again, like an ERP, maybe you have Fusion or SAP or EBS, and you have a CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot, and you have various other source systems, we absolutely excel in those scenarios, and we can very rapidly get your data foundation in place and harmonize all those systems together. With Incorta, we also have some really great performance capabilities, some things that are pretty unique to the platform that allow us to give near real time updates. Whether that's within Incorta or downstream and Databricks, Snowflake, Google BigQuery, wherever we need to operate from like a data integration perspective. You might be a Google shop and you have a Google commit, and we have very seamless integration for getting that foundation in place within Google BigQuery to support Gemini enterprise related use cases, formerly Agent Space, that changed a week or so ago. Or you're looking at Looker or Vertex AI or any other kind of downstream consumption layers. One of the other things that we really excel at, Incorta was designed from day one to be able to handle transactional loads effectively. Think about subledger details from a finance and accounting perspective, or order details from kind of a sales and supply chain type perspective. Those details matter. And with Incorta, we're able not only to, expose that to the business users, but to perform at scale. And I think that's oftentimes where the data foundations kind of fall a bit, with traditional technologies and resource limitations from a performance perspective. If you're executing queries against, let's say, a data mart or a data warehouse, and they're slow, or the data is only refreshed off peak in the middle of the night, and it's stale. If I'm a supply chain analyst, I need that data refreshed as frequently as possible. And stale data that's refreshed off peak in the middle of the night, or maybe 2, 3, 4 times a day, that probably doesn't give me the level of insight and the timeliness that I need to do my job effectively and efficiently. With Incorta, we can hit all those pillars. We can again harmonize multiple systems. We can give you very near real time refreshes that are available to the consumer wherever they're consuming from. And we can also bring in that full fidelity of the data all the way to the most granular transactional detail. And that's really where we excel. Now, moving on just a little bit, if we take a little look, just a little refresher, many of us are kind of familiar with, traditional approach, medallion architecture and so on. But when you think about like a traditional approach, we have to go through so many different steps. I saw a couple folks indicate that they have a departmental database. That tells me that's probably a data mart feeding from a data warehouse. Maybe it's certainly functional, finance, accounting, supply chain, sales, HR, and so on. Now, those types of structures, they take many years oftentimes to get in place. They become very difficult to make changes. You might experience from a business user perspective, if you're more of a business persona, you put in a request, I need this dashboard from a very simple perspective, or I need these metrics. And maybe a month and a half, 2 months later, you have that. Well, that's because of how brittle this traditional approach is, and how many steps that data moves effectively, and how many changes need to occur from a data engineer or somebody with a similar persona to facilitate, that data pipeline end to end to be able to, make those changes and provide, whatever that request is. Uh, and again, generally, I hear those types of change requests take 6, 8+ weeks in most organizations. With Incorta, generally speaking, it's those types of changes can happen in a matter of minutes, effectively. And really what it comes down to is the speed of the data delivery. That has a lot to do with performance. It has to do with kind of internal processes. It has to do with everything that impacts that downstream consumer. Ultimately, we need to have the right granularity of the data. And if I'm a finance analyst and I'm closing my books and I'm doing my trial balances or I'm doing reconciliation type processes, I'm probably going to need access to that subledger detail, which oftentimes is not available in things like data marts or other structures. So oftentimes those folks are going back out into the ERP, trying to find their supporting items for reconciliation type processes. And it's very time consuming. This is why many organizations take 7 to 14 days to close the books at the end of every month. It's very, very resource intense. And we have many success stories here at Incorta where we're able to shave that down to a day or two. Ultimately, a couple of folks also indicated in one of the questions that they don't necessarily trust the data in their organization. And this is very, very common. It's a challenge both for the business side as well as the technical side. And with Incorta, we have pretty much zero hops. We're effectively mimicking or taking a digital copy of the source system schema, and that's effectively how we model the data. So there's less movement, less changes. And ultimately, that lends itself very well from like a validation perspective and ensuring the trustworthiness of that data, to those business consumers. High level overview here. So ultimately, when we're talking about data foundations, oftentimes, Incorta could be leveraged as a data integrator. And what that means is, Incorta is very good at moving that raw, that normalized data, as well as analytic and agentic ready models, think like star schemas or denormalized data sets, out into their platform of choice. And oftentimes we see a lot of momentum around Google and that ecosystem. And really what this represents is Incorta, being able to establish that connection, build those pipelines, and persist via our data destination mechanisms out to that target. And in this scenario, we're talking about Google BigQuery certainly, and ultimately we're able to land that raw data and again the analytic agentic ready models out to BigQuery for downstream consumption. Now, there's a lot of momentum in that ecosystem today around Gemini Enterprise, formerly Agent Space, that changed late last week, I believe it was. They kind of rebranded it. But supporting agentic frameworks more holistically, this is where Incorta, really excels. It doesn't have to be Google ecosystem. It could be, we're landing that foundation in Databricks or Snowflake or elsewhere. And generally, this type of process takes us 2 to 8 weeks to get that full foundation in place to support, whatever's important for, your business and your stakeholders. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump out into Incorta. So we'll jump out into platform. I'm going to illustrate some of these concepts. So with Incorta, again, we're data integration from a data integration perspective and getting a data foundation in place. Ultimately, if you engage with us and let's say that you have Oracle Cloud Fusion, for instance, we also have what we call accelerators. So if I come out to the marketplace, what we'll see is various assets out here. And this crosses, Oracle ERP, whether that's Fusion, EBS, JD Edwards, NetSuite. It crosses. We have coverage for SAP, whether that's ECC or S4 HANA, and various other platforms like Salesforce and Workday and so on. Now, if we hone in on Oracle Cloud Fusion, what we have here is the Oracle Cloud ERP to Google BigQuery. And ultimately what this comes with is it comes with the physical models, including the identification of the VOs, effectively tables in Fusion. It includes the joins, the relationships, but it also includes the semantic layer, meaning it has the analytic and agentic ready models out of the box that we can very rapidly deploy. Now, as an organization, your companies probably have a good bit of customization, regardless of what the ERP is. And this all gets taken into consideration, when we go through a POV or a production implementation. But Incorta was designed to be able to customize these models, very rapidly and with minimal effort. So we can absolutely customize these frameworks to meet your organization's needs very rapidly. Now, in this scenario, if I were to deploy this, what we would have is we would then have coverage across all the core modules within the respective ERP. And that's generally going to include, regardless of whether it's JDE or EBS or Fusion or SAP, it's going to have, your accounts payable, your accounts receivables, your general ledger, your sub ledger, your sales and supply chain modules, HR, and so on. So it's going to have coverage across all of the core modules ultimately. And what we're going to see here in this scenario, I'm coming into accounts payable, is we're going to see, with respect to that data application, all of the core tables, VOs, from a Fusion perspective, have been pre-identified within that data application framework. And not only that, but these are customizable. If I have a custom table that I need to include, I can come up to new, go through a schema wizard, pick that table, bring it in, put the join in, and it now becomes part of my ERP model within Incorta. And we can use it very simply downstream in the semantic layer once it's included in the model. Another aspect here that I'll jump into is that diagram button. Now, this effectively renders the ERD. So what we're going to see here is, not only is the AP module, has the model built out with respect to the joints and relationships, but it has, it crosses over to the commons, it crosses over to the financials, the inventory. So effectively what we have is across the entire ERP, we have kind of a master model, as part of that data application. And ultimately, this vastly reduces the engineering effort that's required, downstream. Now, ERPs are the most complex systems that most organizations have. And by being able to reduce that engineering effort, ultimately it means that we can deliver data products, to the business, to the stakeholders, much more rapidly than with a traditional approach. Another aspect here that's probably even more important, let's say, is the semantic layer. Ultimately, these are kind of the products that generally speaking, the consumption layer is going to set on, and that could be it could be agent space, Gemini Enterprise. It could be Looker. It could be Tableau or Power BI that's consuming from BigQuery. It could be any consumption tool effectively. But by being able to deliver these models alongside that raw, that normalized data coming from the respective ERP or other source systems, we can vastly reduce kind of the modeling effort, in those consumption tools. Think about, Power BI or Tableau, for instance. your business users generally going to have to curate the models within those tools off of raw data. But if we provide those for them, it's pretty significant gains in efficiency, and also potentially from a performance perspective, depending on how we're delivering that. Now, with respect to our data applications, we also have fact and dimensional models. Think star schema methodology. We have that coverage out of the box. For instance, if we come into the general ledger, you can see that we have a couple fact and a couple dimensional models ready to go. So we have our dim around the category and the source. We have our facts around the journal details and the GL balances as part of that out of the box data application framework. Now, again, these can all be customized. We can create new ones. Denormalized data sets can be curated within Incorta, pretty much with ease. And if I wanted to kind of illustrate a little bit of that, since we already have those joins and relationships back in the physical schema, really what this means is if I wanted to create a denormalized data set, I can simply drag and drop those attributes within Incorta. If I wanted to, grab some attributes from my journal line, for instance, and then I wanted to grab some, fields or attributes from my journal header, I can do that. And it's just drag, drop, no writing SQL, no writing Python. You can write SQL and Python in Incorta in a couple of places, but you don't have to do that to curate, these data products, these deliverables, to wherever the foundation resides. Again, whether that's in, BigQuery, Incorta natively, Databricks, Snowflake, etc. We can, very rapidly deliver that for those folks. Now, with that said, if we come back out to the physical layer, as you would expect, we have, the scheduling capability, just as you would expect. So if you wanted your pipeline to refresh every 5 minutes, that could be scheduled to do so. And ultimately, what we're looking at is, once these jobs, start running, we start running these pipelines. Effectively, what's going to happen in the context of a Google integration is we're going to land that data foundation. We're going to maintain that data foundation with inserts, updates, deletes. We control that all from the Incorta side. But we're going to have, the full fidelity of that data at our fingertips, all the way down to that third normal form, that normalized data. But we're also, and potentially even more importantly, we're going to have those fact and dimensional models, that analytic and agentic ready, foundation orchestrated entirely from Incorta and persisted out to BigQuery for downstream consumption. Now, with all of that, I have one more slide to share, and I'll pass it over to Kurt once we're done that. So, kind of to summarize, more or less, Incorta as a platform, if we're talking, purely from like a data integration perspective, it is something that's of interest to your organization. Keep in mind, we can connect to all these source systems. We can connect to, systems that aren't indicated here. Of course, we have, many connectors. A lot of systems use generic JDBC or ODBC drivers. If it's just a simple like RDBMS backend, very common, as we're all aware. But we're going to be able to curate kind of live operational self-service, capabilities and deliver that data, where it's needed, whether it's a BigQuery, a Databricks, etc., or we just simply have end users that are hooking Tableau directly into the Incorta engine. There's a lot of flexibility around the platform, and ultimately that's really where we excel as a platform with Incorta. With that, I'm going to pass it back over to Kurt.
All right. Thanks, Zach. That was really good. Appreciate that. So let's talk about how, again, what do you do with it, right? How do you get to the readiness framework? These kind of the underpinnings of what we're talking about. Zach's whole conversation around building out that data platform, that's the foundation, right? That is how you build trust in the platform. Having the capabilities around the semantic layer and building out the business model around it, and then be able to show the lineage all the way back to the source is such a key piece to building out that that strategy and that process around trust in the data. Again, the foundation for it. So as you're going through that, the whole point of getting to a AI readiness framework, right, is having the underpinnings of those technology. That's what we talked about in the beginning. How do you have that underlying technology there to support it? And then framing your plan, right? Framing your roadmap to how do you go through that, those activities to actually deliver the end enablement around that and transforming your organization for those business. So you got to frame your opportunity, right? You want to really define clear goals, something that you can really that are achievable with what you're trying to do. You want to prioritize, right? You want to really focus on the high value wins, hopefully low complexity, but high value wins, right? Those are the things that you really want to target around. You want to be able to align on the data meeting, because that's, if you don't have good standards around the data and where you're trying to achieve, right, it's going to fall apart. You want to have your business organization, the stakeholders that you're working with, making sure that you can then fall on those meetings and those data definitions, so that you can establish measurable KPIs around, right? Then you can really that's where you gain stakeholder alignment around it. So moving from there, right, that planning, then you can move to experimentation, and that's really the value of what we're talking about. How do you fail fast, right? You want to be able to create some pilots. You want to be able to collect the data. You want to be able to move through the historical streaming and be able to get that data into the platform rapidly, because that's the whole key to it. How do you do this rapidly? You want to make sure you're working through validate your outcomes, because again, building the trust as you're moving it through that data layer and that foundation, you want to make sure you have trust around the data that's for it. And then track those KPIs, right? Track them. So you're making sure that you're organizationally, you're building the trust in those results as they're being brought into the process. Stabilize it, right? So once you get to some use cases and patterns that you're able to actually formalize, you want to be able to then create that strategy and a roadmap around. So you want to formalize it, right? You want to start making that as what you're doing from your delivery, what's going to be your complete end-to-end solution around that. Standardize the data pipeline. So that's where you start to move it from really the SWOT aspect of it to really formulating processes around it. And then you want to start to implement how you're measuring it, right? And continuously quality monitoring it, making sure what your inputs are and your outputs are what you're expected. And then you got to change management. And I think this is where a big piece for organizations is really a challenge, is making sure you're getting the proper adoption, right, around the team. So you get their buy-in. That's the whole point of planning and experimenting. You're trying to get their adoption from that process, which allows you to then start to formalize some governance around that data, right? Creating some frameworks. You want to do it naturally. You don't want to create things that are going to be heavy-handed, but you want to create some things that are going to be to your organization, or fit to your organization around governance. And then as you begin to do it, then you want to start to expand on those, right? So you've taken this small pilot, you want to now start to build it and expand it across your organization, scale it out. You start to show those proven use cases so they can create more functions around it. You want to make sure that you're able to leverage the reusability of it. So really everything you should be doing in these things, how do you make sure you can reuse it, right? That's the whole iteration that goes around it. You automate it, scale it out for your organization, and then start to integrate with broader data sources. So start to include additional data sources on those pipelines and expanding that data set. And ultimately, then you want to transform, right? That's where you want to start moving this to a production cycle where you're able to actually transform the way you're doing things, enabling these business models. And then you've created that pattern, right? The pattern from start to finish and getting success. And really, ultimately, the goal is to get those wins around it so that you can continue to drive more value. You want to create models that enrich, right, and create value around your data sets. You want to enable the services for your organization and have them come to you as a value, as a trust, right? If you're doing something for finance, if they don't trust those numbers, you're going to lose them. So it's all important about building that trust through it. And then you continually, right, don't stop. Just because you go live doesn't mean we're functionally stopped. Then you need to continue to test and validate those improve those outcomes as you're going. Really driving through that innovation and creating that flexibility. So back to the poll questions. Again, we'll give you the answers, kind of the full results at the end. I'll kind of read them out. But what stage are you in the AI adoption right now? Okay, starting to see, watching the market. So a lot of people are just trying to dip their fingers, their toes into it, trying to figure out where it's going. Running pilots, that's great. So you're starting to running through that process, getting some expertise around it, starting to get some learnings around it. Awesome. And so again, I'm just going to end it really what the recommendations are. You really need to, this is the challenge, right? You're leadership's pressuring you. You're trying to deal with fragmentation in your organization, data quality issues, right? All these things that are really happening as you're really part of the living and breathing organization. You got to do a self-assessment. You got to be true about what you can actually deliver, even with those pressures, because ultimately what you're going to deliver at the end, right, is going to ultimately need to either have trust or you're going to lose the organization as a part of that path. So you need to make sure you're getting your data readiness platform in place, make your functions, your frameworks all established. Make sure you're charting that roadmap, right, and making sure you're publishing it out, making sure you're communicating it, so that you can continue to go back through it and have really some manageable steps that you can make sure you're documented through it. So you're going to prioritize your data readiness. That's the most important thing, right? Garbage in, right? Garbage out. You're going to fail. Measure that business value for AI and make sure you're able to reinforce the trust so that you get those proven outcomes, that you see your business is actually getting value back from. And then I'll tell you, again, I'll harp on this one, which is investing in the people and the technology. Change management, if it's forced down the throat of people, they're not going to accept it. But if you're embracing them through the process, that change management is such a key piece to get them into the early stages so that they understand the transition and how they can actually effectively use these processes in their daily jobs. And then, hey, I mean, this is a fun time for all of us that are data, driven. Embrace the journey. It's a fun time right now for us. Right? So enjoy it. It's not a one-time project. It's going to continue to evolve as we go. I mean, we're kind of on the greenfield of these processes, and but leverage your experience around data. So don't. It's not just because it's AI doesn't mean the patterns and success criteria has changed. It's really all the same around data. So one more question: when do you expect to have a defined AI roadmap in place? I see the question move. All right. We'll follow up. We'll leave that if that question comes back up. We'll follow up with that. If you want to again follow us, we're on LinkedIn and our websites. Please feel reach out. We can help you with again your data engineering, your processes, your AI journey. We'd love to help you with it. Again, Incorta is a great foundation for data platform consulting. I think Zach showed a great way of how to leverage that technology. It's such a accelerator for this, and really the key to the foundation. Techstone and Hudson Logic, we're here to help you. We can